roommate's asleep. There's like a 50% chance I get a parking ticket for this. Right now, it's the first couple weeks of my sophomore year of college, and everything feels uncertain. I'm staring down the path that leads into the future, but I can't see through the fog, and that fills me with anxiety. I'm making this video as a sort of time capsule for the future because I live in an age where it's extremely easy to see really successful people. And it's almost by the nature of us seeing them that they're successful. If they weren't, we wouldn't be seeing them or watching their stuff in the first place. I struggle to imagine the people who are currently successful as anything but the successes that they are now. Of course, you hear stories from them about what it was like coming up, but those stories are always colored by the fact that both of you now know that they will eventually become successful. Personal narratives are always backwards facing, but we'll get to that part later. So I wanted to document where I'm at right now, when my life feels like nothing but uncertainty and anxiety. And then afterwards, I'll talk about how we can transform this anxiety and how we can shift our mindset to find peace and maybe even a little excitement for the future. One of the biggest sources of anxiety right now are my creative pursuits, namely this YouTube channel and a novel that I'm currently working on. At least once a day, I question myself as to whether or not I'm wasting my time with these endeavors. I pour so much time into these projects and I never really know if they're going to pay off. Like, I understand on some philosophical level they are already paying off, but I think any creative wants their stuff to be acknowledged and to be put out there to impact other people. Genuinely, I take my writing as seriously as I do any schoolwork. It is the first thing that I do every single day, to the detriment of my health, grades, sleep, more sleep. And I know how ambiguous the path that I've signed up for is. That's just like the nature of doing anything creative. And right now, when I'm just an amateur and I'm still just trying my hardest to get better and I'm not seeing any instantaneous results, it's really easy to start doubting myself as to whether or not I will ever be able to make this happen. Like, I've probably poured around 100 hours into the novel that I'm currently working on, probably twice as much on the novel that I wrote last year, and probably somewhere in between for this YouTube channel. And I honestly have very little tangible results to show for it. And I feel like this is especially hard because it feels like I am surrounded by people who are aiming for pretty straightforward jobs. A lot of my friends are STEM majors. The effort that they're putting in now seems to be directly building a future that they can imagine. But that's just not true for my creative endeavors. Probably at least once a week, the thought reaches my mind of, screw all of this, who cares about creative fulfillment or taking risks? I don't think it's too late to become a CS major yet. But that being said, at this point, I know I'm gonna keep writing or keep doing some type of creative work, even if this never pays off. It's just my favorite and most anxiety-driven part of my day. I absolutely love it. Speaking of school, another source of my anxiety are my academic pursuits. I'm pretty set on pursuing a PhD in psychology and becoming a clinical psychologist. Often, it's only the somewhat stable ground of attempting to become a clinical psychologist that allows me to even attempt my creative endeavors. But even this stable goal of mine fills me with anxiety. This idea of going to grad school or becoming a psychologist is honestly really out of left field. Like, I don't personally know anyone who has become a psychologist or even someone who has gone and finished grad school. Like, I honestly don't understand what the path to grad school looks like. So even if it is a stable path, it is still shrouded in uncertainty for me. I have zero connections in the industry, and I honestly don't know any professors right now that can help guide me through the process. And most importantly, and this is a big one, I have zero research experience. And honestly, not the best idea of how to get into a research lab. So for those of you who don't know, research lab experience is extremely important into getting into grad school. But it's one of those paradoxical things where a lot of research positions are looking for people with prior research experience. Like, what? So basically, I don't know any professors or how exactly to get into these research labs, so I end up really just cold emailing a lot of different places. I've sent my resume to at least a dozen different places in the last couple weeks. Most of the time, I don't even get responses to these emails. I consider myself lucky if I even get a rejection email. Also, am I supposed to just take the first lab that accepts me, like a desperate guy who latches onto the first girl that gives him attention? Or should I wait and try to have some standards for the type of lab that I want to get into? But sometimes having standards is a privilege, and it feels doubly worse because I need to do research. So every rejection and unanswered email feels like a direct roadblock to the goal that I've oriented my entire academic career around. And honestly, it feels quadruply worse because there's nothing more I hate in this world than doing administrative work. I hate having to send out out a bunch of different emails or filling out random forms, and then I have to figure out what I'm going to say in these emails or applications and how to create a decent resume. This honestly just all feels like busy work. Like, I don't know how anyone manages to do this. Like, none of this administrative stuff that I'm doing feels like I'm actually doing anything. But luckily, things have recently started to get better, and I've gotten 1 or 2 responses, so I'm pretty hopeful about the future. But overall, this entire application process has been excruciating and filled me with a lot of anxiety. And moving away from work-related stuff, let's talk about my social life, because who doesn't like talking about social anxiety? I would like to preface this by saying that I'm very lucky to have very, very good individual friends. That has never been my problem, but I feel like I'm still searching for a community on campus where I feel like I really belong. I want to branch out more, but making new friends is hard, and there is so much uncertainty about meeting new people. Like, how do I meet new people in ways that don't feel terribly forced? How do I go from being acquaintances with someone to being genuine friends with someone? And naturally, you're probably going to end up meeting a lot more people that you don't vibe with than people that you do. So it can feel like you're putting in all of this effort and you're not really sure if it's going to pay off. And look, I'll just acknowledge the elephant in the room. Am I ever going to get a girlfriend? Who knows? Throughout all of these different sources of anxiety, there is a common thread stringing them all together. Anxiety arises when there is a disconnect between the effort you put in and whether or not you can imagine the effort you put in shaping your future. Like, I put so much effort in my creative pursuits, applying to research labs and trying to make new friends, but I have no clue whether or not the work that I put in will produce the results I want. It's essentially an uncomfortableness with the uncertainty of the future. But now that we've really looked into the ways that my life feels like a chaotic void and is unresponsive to the effort that I put in, we can talk about how we can go about transforming this anxiety. So the first step is to stop caring about whether or not things ever work out, because you don't have control of the future. I think a lot of wisdom is learning to separate the things that you can and cannot control and really zeroing in on the things that you can control. And to be completely honest, you can almost never really control the outcome of events. The only thing that you can really control is your actions. So you need to be able to find peace in the fact that you did the right thing or you did the thing that you were supposed to. It's something I tell myself all the time when I sit down and attempt to write my novel. I constantly have fears about whether this novel that I'm currently working on is just going to be a gigantic waste of time. But the thing is, I can't really control if this novel that I'm currently working on ever really gets published, or honestly, if it's even good. The only thing that I can control is whether or not I sit down and try my hardest to write every single morning. And so I do. I try to find enjoyment and solace in that action. This is why I got a custom-made coffee mug with one of my favorite quotes on it that reads, "You have the right to work, but never to the fruit of work," from the Bhagavad Gita. Anxiety only affects you because you care about the future. But if you cede over complete control of the future to some universal physical law or Jesus or the flying spaghetti monster, then you cease to feel anxiety. You begin to be able to detach from it, and then you can begin to hone in on the work that really matters. I can still feel peace in the fact that I had done the best I could, and sometimes things just don't work out. Detachment is the antidote to anxiety. Find peace in doing the things that you can control, and then let the chips fall where they may. So this is the spiritual/philosophical answer that I think is the best answer to this problem. And also, I don't think it's an all or nothing lesson. Everyone can benefit from training their mind in this way. We don't have to become monks and give up all of our worldly pleasures to gain benefit from it. Still, there's only so much that we can detach ourselves from because we're only human, and most of us aren't monks that dedicate our entire lives to getting over our desires and attachments. So the other tool that I normally use to help me cope with the anxiety of the future is to remember that you've never known what the future has looked like. And remember all of the great things that have happened to you that now almost feel commonplace or inevitable, that were not at all foreseeable in the past. Like when I was a freshman in high school, I could not have imagined getting into Stanford. When I got into Stanford, I could not have imagined taking a gap year and getting my nail license. When I was sitting in the middle of nail school, I could not have imagined living out of my car and exploring the country. Life only makes sense looking backwards. We make these narrative threads in our head that connect all of these disparate events in our past in order to make sense of them. But you can only connect the dots once you've moved through them. We're so used to our past following this somewhat linear structure because of the narratives in our head that we try to project that onto the future and predict what our future is going to look like. But that has never worked. You just don't know what the future holds. So I invite you to zoom out on the timeline that you're using to look at your life. Realize that you could still very well be a couple of weeks or even a couple of months away from all of the current loose ends in your life tying themselves up, and then new loose ends will appear. Your life will have so many great and occasionally not so great moments that you can't even imagine right now. So look at your future, which is shrouded in this cloud of mystery, with a certain level of curiosity. Pretend you're reading a novel about your life. Like when you're reading a novel, you obviously care about the well-being of the main character, but also you're partly just really curious to see what happens next to them. Like who knows what other adventures I'll be able to go on or the types of people that I'll be able to meet. There's only one way to figure those things out, and that's to live through them. So right now, it does feel like there are a million deficiencies and unknowns in my life. I don't know the answers to these questions, but I do know that I'm going to try my hardest to do whatever I can, and then I'm going to sit back and watch with cautious excitement and a prying curiosity as the future unfolds right in front of me.
Hey, you two! Mwah.